My goodness, and we are friggin' live. This is awesome. This is the first ever live stream for this channel. We are doing this a day after the legendary Tina Turner passed away, and we are joined by the founder and CEO of Pantheon Podcasts, Christian Swain. Christian, thanks for coming on, man. It's good to meet you.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe, and having me on to talk about what I consider probably the single greatest female talent of the rock and roll era. There are others that are in that conversation, but I think I can make a case on why she just was. I'm going to say it because everybody else has said it in the last 24 hours. Simply the best.
Yes.
And so to come on and talk about one of my favorite artists I'm always game for that sort of thing. Unfortunately, it's under sad circumstances, but at the same time, 83 is a good run, and she retired from the stage about 10 years ago. And in fact, by the way, if you get a chance to watch her live performance video from 2009 when she's 70 years old. She's 70 years old.
Yeah.
And, still the whirlwind that she was when she was 22 is just extraordinary to see. And I think that's the thing that I focused on first. I think bar none, there's not a female talent that was as exciting to watch on stage as Tina Turner. Again, there are others that should be in the conversation. The Wilson sisters come to mind.
Oh, yeah.
But in a weird sort of dynamic of Anne was sort of the stand there and singer, while Nancy was the one that that put on the show.
Right.
Right. Sort of thing. But I mean, there was nobody that could quite do what she did, and to the point where she's influencing people like Prince and Michael Jackson and obviously Mick Jagger, who
Oh, yeah.
more than admitted that he stole many of her moves. I think that's a slam dunk as being the most exciting front person, front man, if you will, in the rock and roll era. But she also came with a great singing voice as well, and sometimes you don't get both. And in fact, as I was saying in my post, I think the singer side was actually there's more in the conversation of greatest singer of all time than greatest front person of all time. And just for your audience to know, I consider Aretha Franklin the single greatest female voice of the rock and roll era. Although there are others that are right up there with her again. Ann Wilson belongs in that. Pat Benatar you could put in there. Etta James. There are plenty of there on the vocalist side of things. But to combine both at the highest level, I think Tina smokes them all when you get right down to it.
Yes, absolutely. Well put. So I did see your social media post, and I did watch the video you shared, and it was just fantastic. It was incredible.
Yeah, especially that 820 mark when she's literally dancing on a 2-foot wide beam over the audience, about 30 feet high, with no harness, no side rails. I mean, she slips in those 5-inch heels.
Right.
She's goners. So I was like, and she's 70. So, I'm 10 years younger than her at that point. And, I would kill myself.
Right.
So, pretty extraordinary. And extraordinary up until the end. As a performer, and I give her credit. She also knew that she got to the age where she wasn't able to bring her A game, and then some health issues, and so she retired to Switzerland to be with her partner. I can't remember if they got married or not. I know they were
boyfriend. She used to call her boyfriend all the time. Erwin Bach, I think is his name.
Right.
Who was a European music producer, and God, I'm just so glad she found that sort of love late in life, and that he nurtured that that wonderful talent into having a really great second half. Because we all know, the first half with Ike was atrocious. And that's a tame word for
Yeah.
what the woman had to go through.
It does seem like the two halves of her career, one is so negative and so heartbreaking, but at least the other half is so positive and triumphant and world conquering that I guess maybe in the end it comes out as a wash, but you hate to think that someone should or would have to go through the misery of that first part just to achieve the second. So, I take me back in time a little bit. What was it? When you first came across her music, do you remember what was it that initially grabbed you? What time frame was this? How did you originally get into her music?
Well, I think like a lot of young white boys, of a certain age, she's the fucking acid queen, man, in Tommy.
Yeah.
So you're like, who is that? So that was my first foray of knowing her. I mean, knowing who she was. I mean, I'm sure I'd heard, her and Ike's Proud Mary version.
Oh yeah.
By then, and this is. I think Tommy comes out in 75, so this is right around the time where she splits with Ike, and her career takes a very deep dive, and so her formative years were I was too young for, and came to that later, and listening to the Ike and Tina Turner review stuff, and then seeing bits on television, or she would show up on some of the daytime talk shows, and like with Cher or something like that, and and again, there's this she was more of a celebrity than a musician, if you will. I would think of her as she's older, and her she's on that celebrity circuit, not the I'm still trying to make great music circuit. Until Private Dancer came out in '84, where all of a sudden she is the toast of the town, and now she's everywhere. She's at Live Aid, she's on stage with Bowie, she's on stage with Mick and the Stones again, and things like that. And then going back and seeing the movie Gimme Shelter, and even though there's just these snippets of them in it, you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, that band was badass, as just a rock and roller, just
Right.
realizing that. And so I came in like at the middle of her career, and then the downslide. So she wasn't really a thing for me as I'm developing my tastes. I had to come back after the Mad Max era, the 80s,
Right.
Private Dancer, of which you have behind you there. um uh you know um and then to go and say, wow, listen to this, and what is it, Mountain High, Valley
River Deep,
Low,
Mountain High.
River Deep, Mountain High, which I love.
Yeah.
I never heard it until like I started doing rock and roll archaeology, because it's sort of buried. It didn't do well in America. It did really well in the UK. I think it's the last of the Wall of Sound songs, if I remember right.
Yeah, I
The
recently
last,
did a podcast about Ronnie Spector, and
mm,
so I read a
yeah,
little bit about this, and this was Phil Spector thought this was going to be his true signature world conquering thing, and it
yeah,
tanked, and it put him into such a depression. He basically quit music for like
yeah.
multiple years.
Yeah. So it did. It pretty much ended the Wall of Sound era, which you know, it's a bit excessive. when you think about it, of what he was trying to achieve. You know, if I can, new sounds are, novel, and then they wear thin pretty quickly. So you got to keep on trying to find something new, or perfect it, one of the two. And even before Mountain High, River Deep, it was perfected. So, with Ronnie Spector and all of that. So yeah, so I went back and picked up that, all of her work with Ike. And of course, then the movie came out, and you're like, whoa. Hugely important movie. Hugely important movie. Because the sort of thing that she went through was not unheard of
Right.
at that time. And in some circles, almost an expectation of,
Oh.
control your woman
Yeah.
bullshit. And of course, men can turn quite violent, obviously, she got stuck in a very, very bad situation. But what the movie did was it exposed the idea, the horror, and caused a lot of self-reflection, and caution to men and women of a new age.
Yeah.
If there was a question on what the rules are, this was a new set of rules. Don't do this.
Right.
This does nothing for anybody. And so, I give her a lot of props for being somebody of that stature. And still, remember, this movie comes out in the early '90s, if I remember right.
Yep.
And
1930.
it's she's still in the height of her new fame. This,
Yes.
her solo career is still soaring at this point. And to write the book and then allow it to be made into a movie, to expose all of that, especially with Ike still alive, is very, very brave. So she didn't have to. She had gotten past all of that through her career, and the revived career as the solo artist, and to reach that pinnacle of legendary icon status, all on her own. So she didn't need this to keep her her name in the public eye or what have you. It was almost like a public service, and a way for her to clear out her demons. I'm sure writing the book was that, but the movie was sort of a public service when you think about it.
Yeah.
Watched it again not too long ago, and it still holds up. It's still as harrowing as it was in '93, but it holds up well.
Yeah. Won a bunch of awards, deservedly so. I wonder, what's your take on you've seen the documentary about Tina, the recent documentary
Yeah.
that was on HBO. And
Yeah.
one of the interesting things that I took away from that doc is that she said that she originally wrote the book with Kurt Loder basically to stop getting questions from the media about when is Ike and Tina going to get back together, and try to really explain what was going on. And then ultimately her goal was to not talk about it anymore. But because the book was such a runaway hit, they wanted to make a movie. And, all while she's promoting the book, these are the only questions she's getting. And then, a number of years later, the movie comes out, and, she's kind of has to relive her trauma all over again. And,
Yeah.
and she never quite escaped.
No,
Well, she
never
obviously
escaped it.
Ike, but she didn't
That's
quite
a great
escape.
question, Joe.
Yeah.
I watched an interview last night from I think it was 60 Minutes, and this
Yeah.
is 1997, and of course the question came up, and she's like, we split up 20 years ago. Ike's been married twice since then. So why am I still answering these questions? I mean, why don't you go talk to the new wives and see what's going on over there? You're right. She, it's such look, it's maybe it's the car crash. Everybody slows down. They got to turn and look at it, and that's a fucking car crash. And she was brutally honest about the whole thing, at the same time, it lowered one of the fathers of rock and roll's status.
Yeah.
Rocket 88 is it is one of, if not the, first rock and roll song, and this 15-year-old kid fucking wrote it. As the guitar player in the Bernstein band. But he was a bit of more of a legend than her because of his pedigree and then what he was able to accomplish, especially as a black man in mostly a white world out there, until this all came out. And then, he was nothing but a piece of shit. And, at the same time, given the opportunity to do it on her own, she was able to do so. That 5-year period there in the mid 80s, I think it's her, Madonna, Bruce Springsteen, and Prince, are like, they are the top of the game right there. And then the other interesting fact is just how huge she was in Europe, more so than America, throughout that whole period and well into, her later years. That 2009 video that's from the Netherlands.
The crowds in her European shows.
Oh, they're
insane.
They're off the hook. Yeah. It's interesting that she, the Europeans kind of have this real pop sensibility that you hear a lot, and while she's definitely a pop artist, she's not quite that over the top sort of pop sensibilities that they like, but she worked it and was able to achieve a level of fame, as in fact she said in that 60 Minutes interview I watched last night that in some countries she's bigger than the Rolling Stones.
Oh, sure.
She said so.
Yeah, it's interesting that in a relatively short amount of time in the late 80s she managed to reach elite tier as far as success when it comes to touring and record sales in a real short period of time, and then she just never left. And she just stopped making music. That was the only reason that she stopped.
I mean, not a lot of new albums or what have you. A lot of, but she didn't need it at that point. And let's face it, the music business had changed over the last 20 years, where touring was where the money was at as opposed to the new records. The other big thing that I think is a huge takeaway is that she does this when she's like about 45 years old. Okay, so and the way she bursts onto the scene in the mid 80s is almost like a new artist, and the way she was presented was, this new butterfly that came out, and she's competing against, women in their 20s.
Yeah.
Again, look over your shoulder and look at those legs, and you'll know exactly why. She was, Bob Lefsetz wrote a really cool article. Love Bob. He wrote a great letter, the Lefsetz letter, about her yesterday. He focused on that she's 45 years old competing against these 20-year-olds. And what the public liked about her was she was mature and sexy, she just could give you a look and your heart would melt. There was no histrionics or or any sort of come hither she needed to do other than just a sly little look, or the way she would introduce a song. Just everything about her was just, you know, sex kitten, if you will.
Yeah.
Including when she's 70 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's just, it's really amazing. I mean, let's face it, this music, rock and roll, it's mostly about sex, in fact, its terminology was originally a sex, a descriptor anyway. So, so let's not realize that is what, part of what the game was.
Sure. And there's nothing wrong with it.
But no, there's not. But what my point, or Bob's point really, which I'm regurgitating here, is that it proved that you didn't have to just be a 20-something new hottie to really make it in this business. You could be an older, mature woman and show those little girls what's what. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Absolutely. Actually, you're touching on something I wanted to ask you about, because I know you have a background in the radio industry. The 1980s was pretty friendly, at least compared to other decades, to legacy artists. There were a lot of 60s acts that had big comebacks in the 80s. Tina wasn't alone in that. But I believe she was one of the first to kind of have that big revival. Do you think that it was that era that was just friendly enough that she was able to make it? Or do you think that maybe the industry saw her success and maybe thought to give other artists that had fallen off the charts a second chance? I think of artists like Aretha Franklin and John Fogerty and Roy Orbison, people like that who sort of had a resurgence on the tail end of the 80s.
Well, a couple of things with that. I don't think Tina fits into that category.
Okay.
Of like a resurgence, like like the Monkees that came back in the mid 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Fogerty's a great example. Steve Winwood's another one.
Oh, yeah.
So let me take this in two different ways. Tina is an outlier. The record companies did not believe in her or this project. It was a particular A&R guy, I believe his name was Carter, that shepherded her career to get to this position, and took several years to get there. This was not an overnight thing. Yes, the record business loves to follow whatever the fuck is a success. So maybe some of that came into play. But let's see, that came out in 85. But Mad Max Thunderdome comes out in 87. Is that right?
87,
87, or something like that. And so to me, the bigger reason for the comeback was a couple things. Number one, MTV. So now these people could be repackaged as this, to this MTV generation. And two, the 20-year nostalgia cycle was coming into play. Woodstock's 20th anniversary was coming up in 89. And so these things tend to kind of come back secular, come back into to the culture. And we've seen this time and again. I think of Happy Days and American Graffiti in the 1970s, having that nostalgia for the 1950s, about 20 years prior. And it's funny. I mean, this is a real science now. Right now everybody's trying to repackage the 90s.
Yeah.
Into an ability to sell, because the other thing that happens is, and again, I think this was new in the 80s, but I think marketers have figured this out. Is like, oh, we could sell them all that shit that they couldn't afford when they were teenagers, but they can now because they got good jobs. So let's repackage a T-shirt and a baseball cap and a poster and oh, by the way, we can remaster these things to death to make them buy as many packages as possible. So I think that is kind of why we started to see people like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Buffalo Springfield, the Byrds get back together. All of these, especially the '60s
Mm,
stuff. Let's face it. The '80s. If you want to talk about '80s on the rock side, especially on the hard rock side, I mean, half the bands in LA were just trying to be the next Led Zeppelin. So but that was only 10 years. Led Zeppelin had just broken up in '79. So I think a lot of it has to do with nostalgia. I think there was this new platform that you could market this nostalgia through, and then the timestamps, the cultural events, and especially Woodstock. Woodstock just loomed so large to anybody who was interested in music at that time. It's just it's the Holy Grail. It's the Mecca. It's the at that time. I don't think it holds that sway anymore. I definitely Woodstock '99 helped kill that off. But
yeah.
it's just I was, and I'll say this, I was involved in a little bit of the 50th anniversary proceedings. We've been
Oh,
asked to be involved in some aspects of it, and in two different organizations. And in the end, nobody really got anything done.
yeah.
It turned out to be a real nothing burger, if that's still a saying. In 2019, which was the 50th anniversary. And I mean, let's face it, a lot of these people are just not with us anymore,
Yeah.
and including the crowd, the people that
Yeah.
were there. Including all the people who said they were there who really weren't there, but they think they were there because they took the brown acid. But
Yeah.
anyway, so it just doesn't hold that same um, uh, cachet that it did in the '80s.
For sure. Yeah, I
So I hope that answers
remember.
your question.
I no, it does. I remember when I remember the news about that Woodstock thing. Kept popping up every couple of months in 2018, 2019, and it just seemed like there was a lack of enthusiasm. It seemed there was a lot of mixed messages, and I was ultimately not surprised when it didn't happen. But my next question for you is because I know you are a big David Bowie guy. Tina did
Yeah.
a number of collaborations with Bowie. Probably the most famous one is the song "Tonight." He
Hmm.
makes an appearance on her Live in Europe concert film. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. Actually, there's a couple of guests that show up. If I
Right.
remember, I think Brian Adams is in that one as well. That was the end of her European tour, and it was obviously they were filming it for that. And David comes out in a white tux, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Um,
How
and
great is it that he comes out and they're gonna do his version of Let's Dance, but they open it by leading in with that old Chris Montez, with a cover of that old Chris Montez song "Let's Dance."
mhm.
That "Hey baby, won't you take a chance?" And then it segues right into Bowie's version. That is one of my favorite concert videos from that era, and they're both just smiling to the moon and back. It looks like that's for me. Like if I had a time machine, that's what I want to go back to and see. So
Well,
you
she
know,
she credits Bowie with that first real impetus of somebody changing her career trajectory and
yeah.
getting to what became Private Dancer. They were both on Capitol at the
Oh, okay.
time, and I think they were going to drop her, and they were going to re-up Bowie, and he had been told about this. And so on the day of his signing, He came in, signed the papers, and then, of course, they were all going to go to a big dinner. He goes, I can't go to dinner. I've got a concert I need to go to. And they were like, well, can we come? He said, sure, I'd love to have you come with me to this concert. And the concert was a Tina Turner concert. And the Capitol execs all followed Bowie like a bunch of ducklings into the Tina Turner concert. And they saw what it was that they were about ready to drop and said, oh, we can't let that happen. And so they re-signed her. And then we ended up with Private Dancer. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what do you think of the song Tonight and, that relationship her and Bowie had?
I don't think much of the song, to be honest with you. I don't think it's one of her better songs, or one of his better songs. But you look, them together on stage was as magnetic as her and Mick Jagger together on stage, in a different way. Sweeter. This was more like almost like longtime lovers versus Mick and Keith, which was all fireworks and excitement and newness and all of that. She didn't need them to build up her career or her persona or her on stage, but it's just nice. It's a nice, and it also comes across as equals, very much so. I don't see either one of them treat her like she was just part of the act, sort of thing. So I think they're very reverential with her.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely, it's appropriate that they would be considered equals on the same stage, sharing a stage, not one artist featuring another. I remember when I saw the Rolling Stones in concert at some point, they showed a series of videos of their old influences from back in the 60s, and Tina was heavily featured in that, and that was terrific. Yeah, the song Tonight, not particularly a standout, but she did have other collaborations in the rock and roll world in the late '80s, tearing us apart.
Yeah, the Bryan Adams song, "It's Only Love," right?
It's Only Love. And
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Rod Stewart, It Takes Two.
Yeah.
So that stuff is fun. So I watched it last night. We were talking about it briefly when we started. So you've seen Beyond Thunderdome?
No, what's that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, of course I've seen Beyond Thunderdome. Yeah.
Did you see it when it came out?
Hell yes, I saw it.
Okay.
In the theaters,
take
of course.
Take me back to when it came out.
Look, I saw Road Warrior in 1981 when that came out. I mean, that's amazing. Okay, is there more Road Warrior? Let's do that.
Yeah.
And then it's seen Mad Max on HBO or something like that. Which is not quite the Road Warrior, but you get to introduce.
It's like a primer.
Yeah. It ain't the Road Warrior is just like that is. That's still one of my favorite dystopian movies of all time. So I thought Beyond Thunderdome was a worthy successor to Road Warrior. Although I think Fury Road is even better.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the Mad Max world. And I thought she was great. I thought she did a fantastic job, and was not, usually a lot of times actors get into a role like that and they're really just an embarrassment or a cameo, and now she had a part and a part to play out there that suited her very well.
Yeah, and definitely an iconic look, very memorable. I think she.
Oh, and a great song, and the song is. The fucking song is great. I listened to it last night. It was like, it's just so well crafted. Where everything goes is just like, it's perfect.
And besides the Another Brick in the Wall, perhaps the only good use of a children's choir.
Yeah, I think I would still give another brick in the wall part two
Right, we'll give that.
the lead over that. Yeah, not too many. Oh, wait a minute. What about doesn't uh isn't Bright Eyes? Doesn't that have a children's choir?
Oh, now we're moving
The
up.
Bonnie Tyler uh thing.
Well,
Let's not dive deep into this. No, no, no,
yeah, I
no,
can give
no,
you a
no.
bad one.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan covered "They Killed Him" by Chris Christopherson, which is a very serious song, and he
Uh-huh.
put a children's choir on it. It is atrocious.
Oh.
It's on Knocked Out Loaded or one of those late '80s crapola ones. But yeah, it's interesting to look back. I mean, so you were you working in radio when she had her big comeback in the '80s?
No, I think I caught something about earlier. I do not come from radio.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Okay.
Although everybody says I have a voice for radio, and I keep saying, well, yeah, well, somebody should have told me that when I was like 18. Then I would have done something.
You totally have a radio presenter voice, especially when you're doing the pod.
Yeah.
It's a compliment.
Oh, it is. I just, like I said, somebody should have said something when I was getting. Anyway,
Sure.
no, I did not work in radio,
Okay.
but I got a lot of radio friends, and I got a lot of radio people around us nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, moving more recently, one thing I got a chance to do earlier this year was I saw the Tina Turner Broadway show. I saw it in Chicago, so it's now a touring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
musical,
touring, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's coming to Wisconsin next year, so I'm hoping I get a chance to see it again. Have you had a chance to see that?
No, I haven't. I'm sure it's a lot like the movie, and you get a bunch of Tina Turner songs. It's a jukebox musical sort of thing. So, it's one of those if it happens to show up at the right place at the right time. Sure, I wouldn't be opposed, but at the same time, it's not something that I would go and seek out.
Oh yeah. Well, I will say, for a musical, that it was a lot heavier than I was anticipating. I was sort of expecting kind of a light, fun night out, and it was, musically. But her story goes to such dark places, and the script
it's a bit more
it's
a bit more Sweeney Todd than Sound of Music. So
Right.
yes.
Oh, okay. Well, shoot. So I'll ask one big concept question, then we can start to wrap up here. So when you look back at her full career, and obviously it's going to be an answer of both, but what's the first part that comes to mind? Do you think her story at its core is one of tragedy, or do you think it's one of triumph?
Oh, it's one of triumph. I mean, the coda was written yesterday, and there's no other way to spin this than a determined, talented woman made her life special on her own. She was not dealt with the best of cards. An African American woman from the late 30s. I think she was born in 39. Jim Crow South. And then to get locked into an atrocious. Now I'm having a hard time saying that word. Atrocious. Well, I really am having a hard time saying that word. I think I'll refrain. Horrid situation, relationship that gave her a bit of a career and made her a bit of a star, but at a horrible price to pay. But she had the wherewithal to just finally say, "Fuck this! I'm out of here," and make a clean break. And then to create this second act that is just almost all a run for the roses. There's nothing that really gets in her way once she gets, once that mid 80s shows up, I mean, it's all gravy at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, definitely a triumph. It's sad that she had to pay that price, but a lot of other people may have been destroyed by that. And she credits her Buddhist practice to not allowing that to happen. She learned some Buddhist principles that allowed her to insulate herself from the psychological damage, and to reinvent herself. And that's nothing but positive out there. The last thing I might add, if I can tail on to this, is just, it's I watched some of this channel called Vivo last night, and they were running 24 hours of Tina Turner. And that was kind of like MTV used to do something like that. When Kurt Cobain died. Now, granted, back when MTV, we didn't have rock stars dying every other fucking week.
You're right.
But,
yeah.
But when it did happen, they would make a moment about it, and you would get those videos. You would have that day of mourning, and having a bit of community about that. And I picked up on a little of that yesterday. That it was almost like the old MTV days with this, just one Tina Turner video after another. And that just got me thinking, sadly, that we are at the end of this entire rock and roll story. These people are leaving the stage very quickly here. Tina was 83. I believe Bob Dylan's birthday is today, and I think he's 81, or is he 80?
He's 82. No, his birthday was actually yesterday, and
was it? I'm sorry, yesterday. Yeah,
and so was Patti LaBelle's, and Patti LaBelle's 79.
Yeah, Mick Jagger's 79.
Right.
He's going to turn 80 here. We've lost Jeff Beck just recently.
Gordon Lightfoot, David
Gordon
Crosby.
Lightfoot, Cross. Yeah. Well, hey, I'm surprised Cross lasted this long. So,
no, that's true. I think he was surprised.
Cross got lucky. The others, not so much. I mean, but the point is that this was a special moment. I've been saying this since I started this thing 8 years ago. The reason we call this company Pantheon is the Pantheon in Rome. Its original purpose was home for the gods. Pantheon. So pan meaning multiple, thea meaning theist, God, and so that's multiple gods. And this particular period from the mid 50s to probably the 2000s. There's I always tell people that the last great rock and roll period, which means that the genre that came about expanded on the last one, was grunge. That's it, the ticket sales and the record sales and everything else, was the next iteration that grew. I've come to respect emo, a little bit of new metal, quite a bit, but those audiences, those record sales and those ticket sales were shrinking. Those were shrinking moments in time. Most people don't know that the last rock and roll album to actually hit the top position was Green Day's American Idiot in 2005. That's a long time ago. It's almost 20 years ago. It's just not gonna happen again. There's still, don't get me wrong, there's still great rock and roll out there. There's plenty of it to find. There's some great young bands. If I can focus on a couple of female fronted bands that have that energy that just makes you go, what the fuck? Amyl and the Sniffers. If you know them, she is a force of nature. and Starcrawler. Again, just crazy. And there's plenty of good rock and roll out there. It's just not driving the culture the way it used to. Is my point. And what that means is that rock stars or rock gods are just not going to be made much anymore. We don't live in a monoculture. It's hard to get to that level of fame. The only people I see out there right now are somebody like Beyonce and Taylor Swift, maybe Lady Gaga and Adele. It's a small group, very well crafted. These are more. It's almost like Broadway productions, more so than rock concerts, out there. Not that there's not plenty, Metallica's out on tour right now, selling out stadiums. So, it's not like you can't have it. But again, Metallica's 40 years old. It's where's the new Metallica is my question when I bring this subject up like this. And here we have lost another of these icons that just aren't really going to come around. I sometimes I just remember back in the 70s, man, somebody like this would show up like every other week,
right?
Then had a 40 or 50 year career. And I think that's the hard part. It's just there's just so much different avenues and roads to take that it's just hard to have that sort of impact that somebody like the Beatles or a Dylan or a Tina Turner would have today or in the future. You're just not going to see those rock stars being minted like we had them back in the day.
Absolutely, yeah, and that is too bad. But what I say on my podcast all the time is that when an artist like this passes away, the only silver lining is that it gives a real clear silver lining for us as fans to re-examine that catalog and remind ourselves why we're fans, and and also accept the responsibility that it's really our job now to keep their legacy alive.
That's very true. That is what we do around here, isn't it, Joe?
Absolutely.
It is the mission. It was part of the original mission was, as when I thought about how to create this thing, which ended up becoming Rock and Roll Archaeology, I felt number one, that the story was pretty much written. I will say that rock and roll has come back a little bit in the last couple of years. It's not dead. I thought it was way more dead in 2015 than it is in 2023. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've seen, and I think part of it is that audiences, both young and old, are looking for some sort of authenticity, that we've gone through this period of perfection in music where everything's on the grid, auto tune, every note is in its perfect place. And, we've achieved that. Great, but it's soulless. And people have begun to reject that. And everything's a backlash, we have that. And so, what rock and roll really is always authentic. If it ain't authentic, you ain't doing it right. Okay. I can tell you that right away. So you're seeing a little bit of a rise of that. But my point was in 2015, I felt like the story was pretty much a beginning, middle, and an end. And I still feel that is the case culturally, and that, other things have taken the place of where music sat in the late 20th century. And then the other was that as I was growing up and as I dedicated my life to music, it was always considered lowbrow. It was looked down upon by the intelligentsia. That's not where real creativity lies. If you go be a jazz musician, or you go to Broadway, or movies, or what have you, that rock and roll especially was anybody could do it. 3 chords and the truth, and a couple of guys from the neighborhood, and the next thing you know, you got a record in the jukebox and they're playing it on the radio. But to me, that's the beauty of it. That is America to me. That is the democratization of music. And I think that's what we experienced, was this reflection of our society presented in this musical format that we call rock and roll. And I consider that pretty much all the music of the late 20th century. That musicians weren't treated like gods prior to this era. Maybe there were very few, like a Bing Crosby or Frank Sinatra, which is just like one or two. But even then, and again, it's just following mass media. I mean, Charles Lindbergh becomes the first mass media star in 1929. So that's when the clock begins. Okay, and then you have somebody like a Bing Crosby in the 30s, and maybe a Bob Hope and a few others, and then of course Frank, takes it to a whole nother level. But it's Elvis. And if I can, episode 2 of Rock and Roll Archaeology, Elvis and the Rise of Television, that sets the stage for this whole thing. You also have, we're coming out of World War II. We've got a lot of new technology. That technology is being moved from a military purpose into commercial purposes. Part of that is in the studio technology. That had really begun to improve, and you really begin to hear it in the 1960s. And then the Beatles show up, and they're there, television's there, the technology to make music sound, stereo comes about in the mid 60s. All of this follows this technological change that then pushes against the culture. And I just think that the whole story is just absolutely fascinating. It is. Look at anybody's bookshelf that is interested in this music. It's just, there's a million books out there.
If you're gonna put me up on cue here, just
well, there you go.
Yeah, there it all is.
I have my virtual background on, but I have the same thing. And the only thing that I can compare it to is World War II. As that significant in changing history. And I think it did. I think it changed history that significant in a very positive way, not a mostly negative way, which, with 100 million people died in World War II. So, that's bad. Right. Yay, America, we won. But, we beat the Nazis and all that, but we still had to go through the process, and it really sucked. Most of rock and roll is all positive. And my point is it infiltrated, and it educated, and it affirmed this American culture, just as it was becoming the dominant force on the planet.
Absolutely. Well put. And speaking of rock and roll archaeology, I meant to mention this at the start, but you are fresh off a recent episode from the podcast. That's about the rise and fall of FM radio. I think that's why I got radio.
See, maybe that's where you thought I was a radio guy.
Yeah, I think that's
because I come across as such an expert on my podcast, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Before you get out of here, do you want to give a quick tease of what that episode was like?
Yeah. Thanks. Rock and Roll Archaeology is a chronological telling of the history of music of the late 20th century. We've been working on it for 8 years. We're at episode 23, I believe. I think this was 23. And it takes us about 6 months or so to research, write, and produce each episode. And in fact, the reason there is the network, and the reason you're on the network, is just basically because somebody finally wrote to us and said, "Can't you do something else in between?" And we were like, "Oh yeah, I guess we could." And so we created 6 originals, and then people started, like yourself, emailing saying, "Hey, can I be a part of your network?" And we were like, "Yeah, I guess we have a network." And so then we really put our attention and focus on the network. And so Radio, episode 23, takes place in the 1970s, which is where we're at. The early 70s, by the way. Working on it 8 years, and we're in the early 70s. Okay, just so people know what's going on. Now we also do these shorts. we do these shorts now that we put in between that are quick hitters, single subject. It's a big story, and to be honest with you, the further along we get, the harder it gets, because it's like a big giant funnel. If you're talking about the music of the 1950s, rock and roll of the 1950s, you're talking a very small group of people that are making it. It's like your two hands, like about 10 people that are actually really the drivers of this. And of course, that all goes away in the early 60s, for a variety of reasons. Part of it being that the man wanted it to go away. Gosh, can't have black kids and white kids playing with each other. So Elvis went to the army. Chuck went to jail. Little Richard went back to the priesthood. The rise of Pat Boone, and the easy music of the early 60s. Luckily, there was still Motown and Stax, and so some people were making some good shit, mostly black music.
Yeah.
It wasn't until February 9th, 1964, that those mop tops from Liverpool came back and threw it in our face. And then there was no putting the genie back in the bottle at that point. So. Now I forgot my train of thought when it was.
And then that, we worked through the 60s, and that brings us to your most recent episode.
Oh, I'm sorry, the episode. So, the rise of the freeform DJ, starting with Tom Donahue, who kind of created the format, actually here in San Francisco, KSAN, and that how radio and its symbiotic relationship with the music really grew in the 1970s to be just, that was how you marketed your music. Was that was it. It was that, maybe a little Rolling Stone magazine, because up until the early 70s there wasn't really much of music journalism. There were a couple of startups like Rolling Stone, but they really didn't get big until the early mid 70s. You had the record stores and your record store clerks that would help, but really it was the FM DJs that told you what the hot new music was. And because this freeform curation was allowed to exist out there, which these guys were, first of all, they were passionate about the music. They were really interested in what was going on. They saw this and they saw and fell in love with this counterculture that went along with it, and they became that's the sales people of that era out there. And so it's a short thing. It only lasts to the early 80s. Pretty much the corporation started buying up these independent radio stations that had a lot of this freeform out there. Playlists came about, people like Lee Abrams, and again, I've gotten to speak to Lee a couple of times, and this wasn't done in a vacuum. These guys weren't, once they kind of established themselves, they kind of got lazy. They didn't continue to find the new stuff. They didn't continue to curate the gold and get that. They kept on playing the same old songs that they loved. And we make a big point of that. The FM DJs pretty much, missed the boat on punk and new wave. Until it was forced upon them. Yeah. And that then allowed the playlists and the corporate formats to come back in and say, oh no, this is the hot stuff and this is what you need to do. So we kind of go through that period of the 1970s when radio was king, and if you weren't playing your 8-track, you were listening to whatever was on the radio.
Yeah. Yeah, and I enjoyed that episode. FM radio, that history is interesting to me. One of the first, an early episode of this show was I interviewed one of the last great FM radio DJs, at least in my market, a guy named Steve Palick, and we talked about that stuff for quite a while. And I find that history fascinating, so I enjoyed the episode quite a bit.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think yeah, it's interesting. You said that a radio DJ who had a level of fame in your area. I don't even know that name. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I and my writing partner here for Rock and Roll Archaeology, Richard Evans, Grew up in L.A., second biggest media market in the United States, and with probably a more diverse radio market than even New York. And so we got to enjoy the fruits of that.
Yeah.
But we originally were like, oh, well, we're going to highlight some of the DJs. And we came up with a couple. And in the end, we realized that every community had their DJ, which we would piss off so many people because we didn't talk about their favorite DJ. Right. Than that, because it's such a localized thing. I mean, that's the first thing you need to know about radio, and part of the reason why we're in podcasting and not radio is because radio is a limiting technology. It's only good so far. So there's that, and so to me, the first thing as a business person I might say is like, okay, I have this technology that is local. Let's see, what should I focus on? Oh, I know, a national playlist. What in the fuck are you thinking?
Right.
It's local, you dumb fuck. Focus on the local. It's only local. It only goes so far, the signal. And so, but, of course, they bought all the radio stations and they foisted upon us, their 500 songs, and that's the only 500 songs that they'll play for the rest of eternity. And it's surprising, the audience walked away. I can't believe that, and moved on to other things. And so, radio, its days are numbered. Just as well.
Yeah, I mean they're taking AM radio out of cars. I think FM. It's only a matter of time before.
There's no need for it. There's no need for it. I mean, we all walk around with the devices with the entirety of human knowledge in our hands, including whatever we want to listen to, and an infinite number of choices as well. Why would you, turn on something that's going to broadcast to you what it thinks you want as opposed to what you want? So yeah, not going to happen. But podcasting is that future. Podcasting is the technological advantage that will wipe out the old horse and buggies, just like the automobile did.
Absolutely. Okay, well, before we get out of here, let's circle it back to Tina for one last question. Let's send the folks home with some recommendations. So these don't have to be your favorites of all time, but let's just list off 5 songs, we'll say. 5 songs that, for someone who might be a casual or maybe isn't terribly familiar with her work, what would be the first 5 songs you think of when you would, recommend Tina's catalog? If you need a minute, I can go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. So my favorites of the moment right now are We Don't Need Another Hero from Thunderdome, It's Only Love with Bryan Adams, of course, What's Love Got to Do with It? I think that's probably her signature song. But, one that might compete with that is another pick of mine, Simply the Best. And then my deep cut, my dark horse, is the lead-off track of Private Dancer. This is the song I've been playing on repeat. It's called I Might Have Been Queen. That one really hooked my ear for the last 24 hours. So those are my 5 favorites of the moment.
All right. So I'm going to start with her and Ike and Tina's Proud Mary. We like it slow and then we like it rough. I mean, come on, man. It's just thinking about it gives me tears of that moment when she's swaying and they stop and then boom, double time that fucker. That's pretty cool. And then what I will add with that is the song I led with on my social last night, which was Nutbush City Limits, which is, that's her first solo credit as a songwriter, and it's a great song.
Oh, what a way to open.
Yeah, it is a banger, and so that's great. So that's two. You know what? I'm going to throw in because I forgot about it until you mentioned it. Is that hey? You know what? She got a Bond song, man.
Oh
She got a
yeah,
fucking Bond song. You know, she did Goldeneye.
yeah, that's right.
And it's not a bad one.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a documentary that came out last year on the music of James Bond. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it.
I
mean,
need to see that. I love it. I love
if
Bond
you're a
movies.
Bond fan,
Yep,
it's a
guilty.
can't miss. It's so good, and it just goes through just the music, and how they came up with it, and how they got the themes, and then of course once they figured out that getting somebody like a Shirley Bassey in to do a song was like killer for them and a whole new revenue stream.
Yeah.
So I'll throw that in as number three. Wow. Better Be Good to Me.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite second act Tina song.
That's off of Private Dancer.
Yeah. It's just so it's so sexy and so empowering.
Yeah.
At the same time. And I could say River Deep, Mountain High. What's Love Got to Do with it? Obviously, Private Dancer itself. But I was looking through this list and I was like, I Can't Stand the Rain. Her version.
Oh, there you go.
I was like, oh yeah, that's a great cover. At that time.
Yes.
And she could just do anything. She could, Lady Gaga's that way,
Yeah.
I mean, she literally she'll go and play with fucking Tony Bennett one night, do her own act the next night, and then play with Metallica the night after that. And Tina could do that. She could go soft, she could go hard, she could go, rock, she could go light, pop, she could get with Cher, or Mick Jagger or what have you, and just own wherever that she walked onto without airs and without and she made it look easy, and that's I'm a performer. It's hard to get the crowd to, eat out of your hand. And boy, I mean, she had that natural ability. It wasn't like she ever had to work for it. It just seemed so easy. And like she was talking to you, from the stage,
Yeah.
So there you go. That's my five.
That's a great list. So we're closing out with 10 fantastic songs, and what's so great about her catalog is that it runs so deep, though, so that there's so much stuff to explore, and it's all, there's no, you don't look at her discography and think, ooh, like there's no bad era,
No, but it's also very, she's also not prolific. She's not a Paul Simon or a Bob Dylan or whatever.
But sometimes that's okay, because it
is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, save the good stuff for the good, for what you put out.
Right.
Don't maybe you shouldn't put everything out. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, in this day and age, I say, yeah. Put whatever it out, whether it's great or not, people are going to forget about it in a week anyway. So who gives a shit? So
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, hey, Christian, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming
Joe.
by.
Of course. Anytime. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, sad, but fun. I feel good about Tina now.
Yeah, I do too.
I was sad last night. It was just another icon gone, and I guess it just makes me feel old. It makes me question my existence and how long I have and things like that. I mean, so it's always sad to see that our heroes leave the stage.
Yeah, that it's always a reminder, but the positive side is we got the many years that we did have with them.
Yes, we did, and the music lives forever. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think
All right,
we
Joe.
can call it here. Let's do this again sometime, but maybe under happier circumstances.
Whatever you need, no
Okay.
problem. You just let me know. All right, Joe.
All right. Have a good night, Christian. Take care.
Bye bye.
Okay. Well, how great was that? That was our first ever stream. Oh, I'm messing with all the aspect ratios here. Let me see if I can fix this up a little. Then that was Christian Swain, who is the founder and CEO of Pantheon Podcasts, which is the podcast network that this show is now on. So if you want to learn more about his show, go check out pantheonpodcasts.com. That's called Rock and Roll Archaeology. Like he said, he's been doing that show for 8 years now. And you can find this show on Pantheon Podcasts as well. So I don't know how many people are still out there watching the stream. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd like to do this again, more often in the future. I don't know what that looks like. I don't want to just do streams only about, rock stars that pass away and sad topics. Hopefully we can find some positive topics to have, conversations about. But we'll see how it goes. But in any case, if you did watch any part of this, thank you so much. Please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. And you can find our social media links on the YouTube page, and if you wouldn't mind giving us a follow there, you can see a lot of other great classic rock content. And if you add me on Facebook or Twitter, today, and you want to see Tina Turner content, hey, don't worry, I got you covered. I've been sharing a lot of great Tina Turner material, so please check us out there. But with that, I'm going to call it here. Our first ever live stream in the bank. So thanks again to everybody who tuned in. Have a great night.